Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the EA Global Summit 2020. Thanks once again for joining us. This is Nizam from the organizing team. And here with us, we have Alain, the founder of Labnaf, and Arsalia, the Archimate and Labnaf consultant and trainer at Sparx Services Central Europe. And they'll be doing a presentation on enterprise visualization and transformation using Labnaf. Labnaf is an innovative and highly automated solution for enterprise visualization and transformation. So before passing to the presenters, I would like to make a quick note on using the Teams channel to log your questions or raise anything that you would like to discuss with the presenters during the session or after the session. We will have some questions answered by the presenters if time permits, or they will be available in the Teams channel after the session or during the summit to provide more inputs or provide a more elaborate answer for you. With that said, I welcome you all to the session once again, and I'm requesting the presenters to continue with this great presentation. So over to you, Alain and Australia.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Orshoya and I am a EA trainer, consultant and speaker at Sparx Services Central Europe. My focus is enterprise architecture and solution architecture using Archimate and Labnaf. And this is Alain de Peter. He's the developer and founder of Labnaf. Alain, could you tell us more about yourself, please? Who are you?
Hello, Shoya. So I'm Alain de Preter, founder of Labnaf. It is a software company that helps customers understand their organization, envision its future, and plan transformations. So about what I've been doing during the last 35 years, half of my time was about researching languages and frameworks, and also about software development. And the other half was about applying the results on business projects in large companies.
What was on your mind around the time you created Labnaf?
That was around 2005. We started some research project on domain-specific languages, DSLs, and also on software factories. And that was at the Microsoft Unisys Alliance. At that time, many people started creating their own little DSLs, including myself. And the issue was how to integrate these DSLs because these were not designed to be integrated. And then that is when I started developing an approach for merging not only languages but also frameworks in general. And then I used this approach in different organizations, notably for enterprise architecture. And finally, 1 year ago, a very large consultancy company asked me if they could use my latest product. So I said, okay. And 6 months later, I created a company and I called it Labnaf, like the product.
What are the 3 main reasons companies should use Labnaf for strategy and architecture?
Well, the first reason is that Labnaf is a turnkey solution. A turnkey solution for driving transformation and at large scale. It's not just a software, it is a complete actionable framework. So that includes the process, the language, the repository, and the software. It is ready to go and it is dynamically adaptable. So you can directly focus on your deliverables.
And what is the second main reason for using Labnaf?
The second reason why companies should choose Labnaf, it is because of its actionable process for driving transformation and the fact that it uses a single language throughout the entire process.
Okay, but how would you define a transformation process in the first place?
What is a transformation process? So a transformation process is about changing the way the organization works. It is about transforming the operating model following a defined vision. It is about visualizing the enterprise, visualizing the problems and the opportunities. And it is also about defining the goals and the target capabilities. For example, we might want a new capability to sell bus tickets on mobile devices. Then it's also about defining capability roadmaps leading to the desired situation. Then it is finally about defining a roadmap of projects to make this happen. And during each project, it's about creating a sound architecture solution. So more than that, Labnaf does not cover detailed design and developments. Labnaf focuses on driving transformations. So, in other words, Labnaf is not about building solutions or deploying solutions in the organization, nor is it about monitoring and improvement. Labnaf is about driving transformations.
So, what is the real process then? And can you give us an overview?
Okay, let's dive into the process of driving transformations. So, using a set of architecture portfolios, you import, you model, you visualize your operating model. You then summarize information and you identify oddities using charts and dashboards. Once you have a clear view on the business context, you identify or you define a meaningful vision, a strategy for the future. In order to execute this strategy, you create roadmaps. You define some steps to get where you want to be. So these roadmaps contain the target capabilities that you want to deliver. To deliver these target capabilities, you create projects. A project can be a predictable waterfall transformation project, or it can be an agile information project that we also call an epic. Each of your projects delivers a solution. Using the Labnaf language, your architecture solution is simply and precisely described at different levels of detail. Your architecture solution reuses, enriches, and updates the enterprise description, and the solution clearly maps to the strategy. Then, once your solution gets approved, it can be iteratively implemented. Then at some point, the solution will start running in production, and you will then need to update the enterprise description because you need to reflect the new situation. The Labnaf process is not just documentation, it is entirely implemented in the language, in the repository, and in the software. You can find more information about the Labnaf process. There is a video on the Labnaf channel on YouTube.
How is this process using standards?
Yes, the process unifies many different standards and best practices. It does not integrate standards because they were not designed to be integrated. Instead, it merges their concepts based on precise semantics. And of course, this saves you much time and money.
And what is then the third reason why companies should go for Labnaf?
So the third reason to use Labnaf is that it provides lots of productivity features. So these productivity features industrialize delivery, and this is important for governance.
What are those productivity features?
Okay, there is automatic import, value calculation, diagram and heat map generation, backups every night if you want, model validation, Excel generation, Word and PDF generation, and website publication. And you can use these generated web pages to discuss diagrams by email. You can then start this task either on demand, or you can schedule this task to run, for example, every night.
Enterprise Architect provides charts and heat maps to visualize different things. How are these actually used in Labnaf?
Yes, indeed. In the sample repository, there is a set of reusable dashboards for each stage of the process. There is an EA version of the charts. Here, for example, a heat map with the application TCOs, and there is a pie chart. There are two bar charts, like you can see. And with ProCloud Server, you can, of course, access these charts remotely, for instance, on your phone.
I see. So does it also integrate with the Prolaborate?
Yes, you can also have navigable charts and dashboards, and that is thanks to Prolaborate. So Labnaf and Prolaborate are collaborating on this. So you can provide sea-level visualization and navigation as well. For example, the heat map on the top left corner shows the life cycle status for each application. And the bubble chart is for architecture management. It shows for the key applications how much documentation is available and the number of users. Then in the bottom left corner there is a nested pie. This is to navigate projects and the impacted applications. And finally, in the bottom right corner, you see a roadmap of projects classified by status.
And what about customization?
Yes, Labnaf provides many productivity features for this as well, and can also transform any language inside an existing model. But we will see this later.
What is the most important message you want to share with us right now about Labnaf?
Well, the message depends on the audience. There is an important message for the CIO, there is another one for the architects and the team in general, and there is a third one for the service providers. For the CIO, the benefit is that out of the box, Labnaf is all in one and ready to go. Your architecture team can directly focus on the business outcomes. The transformation process, the language, the default metamodel, the viewpoints, the repository, and the software, everything is already integrated. And you have seen that standards and best practices are already merged as well. So right from the start, you are already saving several years.
And of course, there is the architects. And for the architects, what is, in your opinion, the most important message about Labnaf?
For the architects and for the team in general, I would say that the message is direct and continuous collaboration. All these different roles participate in a common process of driving transformations. And during this process, they all speak the same language, they share the same repository, and they use the same software. So that's why I say that there is direct and continuous collaboration between disciplines.
And then what about consultants and service providers?
They can answer RFPs much better, faster, and cheaper, because the core components of their RFPs are already integrated and they are fully documented. Also, Sparx systems and Labnaf software are rather inexpensive, so consultants and service providers can offer more value for a lower price than the competition.
Okay, so great. How can someone get started with Labnaf?
From an installation perspective, it is quite simple. You install the software and the startup repository, and then there is also a repository with examples that you can use as a reference. Now, if you don't install the customization environment, you get the default built-in configuration. That means the default language, attributes, and meta model.
Okay, and what about initiating a Labnaf process? Do we have to start everything all at once?
No, you implement this step by step. You need to choose what you will start with. And to make this decision, you typically assess your current way of working. For example, you might ask yourself the following questions. Do we have any decent enterprise visualization? Is our strategy well communicated? Is it based on well-identified business context? How are we planning our target capabilities and the impact of our projects? Do we have a clear visibility on this? Is our solution architecture content well governed? Does it enrich our enterprise description? What are the priorities for the business and for IT? So based on this assessment and priorities, you decide what you will focus on first.
What are the views that you deliver in the process, and what is the actual content?
In the publicly available Labnaf guidance, the process is also described as flows of viewpoints. These are the types of view that can be delivered. This can be diagrams, charts, and reports. Here we are zooming into a specific scenario. These are the viewpoints for the IT architecture solution. There are other scenarios. You can see what the viewpoints are and their relationships. There is, of course, detailed documentation for each and every viewpoint, and there is also a set of default mandatory viewpoints. And this is used in a project dashboard to track missing viewpoints. So that is quite important for governance.
Can you show me a concrete example of a view? For example, show me an application interactions view.
Yes, this is a sample application interactions view. It shows the flows of information between applications. Note that applications are the entries in the application portfolio. They bear all the useful attributes. The application components and data store that are part of these applications do not bear these attributes. It would be unmanageable. You can see these little bars there and dots on the connectors. These are the architecture plateaus. So each element and connector can belong to any of these three different plateaus, as is transition to be. So you don't need to replicate these elements. It is another dimension. Time is another dimension. Well, what's important to note is that these are the plateaus for the application landscape as a whole. It is not just for one project, it's the entire landscape. The focus of this specific example that is displayed here is on the ASIS plateau. So the elements and connectors that do not exist in the ASIS plateau are automatically grayed out.
And if I want to model more detailed application interactions, how do I do that?
We can dive into application interaction details, and by the way, this is also the name of this viewpoint. Each application can contain application components and data stores. In Labnaf, there are specific types of elements and connectors at different levels of detail. And this applies not only to application architecture. This is very important if you want to create meaningful queries, reports, charts, and dashboards. You cannot create meaningful reports and charts if you are mixing this level of details, because then your reports, for instance, would mix application components, applications, data store. You wouldn't know what it is. So it's important to have this level of details everywhere. It is the same for the connectors, by the way. We have also connectors at different types of connectors at different levels of detail.
And what is the approach for creating a meaningful language and process like Labnaf?
Yes, first I was inspired by a large set of standards and best practices. And these include, of course, the experience of the people that I worked with in different places. From these, I created a first version of a process for driving transformations. And that included some initial sequence of viewpoints, draft viewpoints. These are the viewpoints needed for describing the enterprise, the vision for transforming the enterprise, and the changes to this enterprise, the architecture solutions. Then I built a first version of a conceptual metamodel to represent all of these.
And how did you make sure this meta model makes sense?
To make sure it makes sense, I used system semantics. These are the core semantics of any system, like an enterprise, a city, a transformation system, or even the weather. This is an essential reference to ensure that a meta model really makes sense. And what was also essential, of course, was the feedback and ideas of my colleagues, the experts in different disciplines. Then, from the conceptual meta model, I created a language and a language meta model. Then I used the language in the viewpoints. But of course, this was a very iterative process, many years and many iterations and a lot of feedback from many people.
Well, then, I'd like to take a look at the Labnaf meta model. Would you?
So this is part of the default meta model. The left side of this meta model is used for describing the strategy, definition, and execution. The right side is used for describing and visualizing the enterprise. So in other words, this is the enterprise architecture, if you want. You can see that the meta model is expressed using the end user language itself. That makes the meta model easy to read and to maintain, because the meta model specification and its documentation are one and the same thing. You can see also that in terms of style and certain colors, I try to make it familiar.
And is this meta model also used for solution architecture? And would this particular model, for instance, be enough?
No, look, this other part of the meta model is for solution architects, and it is only an overview. Solution architects need more element types and many more relationships. So the rest of the meta model is used for describing architecture changes, new solutions and changes. Solution architects need a lot of flexibility. They often need to dive into many more details than the enterprise architect. But there is one single default meta model that covers everything. Now you can also create your own meta model or customize this one.
What about customization? So can you actually customize this meta model?
Yes, you can easily customize the language, the meta model, the toolboxes, the diagram types, the tagged values, and other things. The Labnaf customization workbench provides a simple staging environment to do this. You can control your dev, test and prod environments from a single window, and this environment is set up in a few clicks.
So to change the default meta model, I can simply change the diagram, right?
Yes, to change the meta model, you just add or remove connectors. Then you press a button and the validation rules are dynamically updated. Labnaf will directly prevent you from creating invalid connectors. Now, the changes you made in the meta model might create errors in the existing model, and that is why Labnaf also sends error messages, emails. These error messages are routed automatically to the right people, and the message routing follows a combination of criteria, and you can configure this as you wish. So with this approach, you can quickly change the meta model or create your own, and it becomes a very agile process.
What do I do if I want to transform the language in my existing model?
There might be different reasons why you would need to transform the language in your existing model. Maybe you imported a model from another language. Maybe you imported a model from another tool. Or you want to quickly change the language in your model without losing anything. Or you might have changed your meta model, and because of that, the connections in your existing model are no longer valid. In any case, you can always use the Labnaf language transformer. It can transform any language into any other language, and that includes elements, connectors, diagrams, and tagged values. And for the ones who know Sparx Systems Enterprise Architect in detail, it can also update default child diagram types and tag groupings.
Okay, can we summarize now?
Yes, to summarize, Labnaf is an innovative solution for enterprise visualization and transformation. It unifies numerous standards and best practices. It is all-in-one, it is highly automated, and you can customize it in a few clicks. For the CIO, Labnaf is ready to go. You don't have to spend years creating a framework. It is already there. For the architect and for the team in general, Labnaf enables direct and continuous collaboration. Everyone speaks the same language. Service providers can answer RFPs faster, better, and cheaper because everything is already unified and documented.
So thank you, Alain. So that's for the theoretical part of our presentation or webinar, and let's move to the more hands-on practical part. So can we have a little demo?
Yes, let's have a little demo. So Labnaf comes with 3 repositories. The first one is a startup repository which contains a structure of packages, elements, and diagrams. The second one is the sample repository, which is this one, which has a same structure, but with a sample content. And the third repository is the guidance repository. This one contains the end user documentation, the modular documentation, and it is provided in the form of a model. So if we look at this sample repository, it's about a company called Bobco, the bus operating company. And to describe this enterprise, there is a visible enterprise description with some portfolios and catalogs inside. There is a vision, strategy, definition, strategy, execution, which provides a vision to change the enterprise. There are the projects which realize the vision and that effectively change the enterprise and change the visible enterprise description in the repository. So let's focus now first on one of the key catalogs, the enterprise functions. So these enterprise functions represent the functional taxonomy of the organization. I don't call them business function, I don't call them business capabilities, because I don't want to have any dispute about terminology. And because also I want to use the term target capabilities as in the scaled agile framework, which I need to create capabilities roadmaps. So I don't want the same terminology to be used twice for different semantics. Wouldn't make any sense. Now, if I dive into this enterprise function there, you can see that this diagram has been automatically generated. These are real elements at each level, and you can see that these elements have been flattened, so it's another way of displaying the same elements, but they take less room on the screen. Another advantage of generating diagrams is that they are all complete and they all look the same. Whoever created the diagram, they all look the same layout. You can see that this diagram contains other items, cosmetic items, legends, and if I zoom in a bit further, you can see another type of diagram that was generated. This type of diagram contains applications, so you can see the applications that realize this enterprise function. Again, they have been flattened, and they also apply some dynamic legend. So how does it work? You can see that this diagram has been generated following some templates. So we have in Labnaf some diagram templates, and you can change these templates. For instance, you can change the dynamic legend to show some other tagged values, to highlight some other tagged values in your generated diagrams. Now let's go back to the Bobco main diagram there, and let's look into one of the other key catalogs, the applications catalog, which is part of your application portfolio. And so you can see here the catalog of applications, and let's dive into this report, which was generated automatically as well. So this one is generated either on demand or periodically, and you can see that it contains groups of tagged values or properties, and each group has a color. You can see also that there is some mapping with enterprise functions and at several levels of detail. And actually the mapping is happen at that level 3, and this one is automatically calculated, consolidated. There is a consolidation of mapping at each level. And how was this diagram created? So as I said, it was following a template. So if I go to this template here, this is the one that was used to generate this Excel sheet. You can see the groups of different tagged values or properties, and you can see you can rename the tagged values into a name that you want to see in the spreadsheet. These are the mappings, so you can see that there is actually a language to model all of these items, the report template, the properties template, and the connection template. So this is a connection template, and if I look into the into this template there, you can see how the connection was defined. So what else can I show you? Okay, let's look at the dashboard that was created. So there are plenty of dashboards already provided for you. And you can see this one, for instance, is a dashboard of applications with the highest TCO versus criticality. And well, plenty of other ones. Okay. What else can I show you? The initial value calculation. Yes. So here you can see that these applications I can create new application actually, and it will automatically assign some initial code. So you can see 43, 44. So these codes, whatever code, whatever tagged value is automatically initialized for you. It can be text, it can be a mixture of text and numbers, whatever. It can be actually any kind of complexity. It can even take into account the connections. These calculation, initial value calculation, has been defined also using a modeling language in the repository. So there is a modeling language for defining the calculation as well. Then next thing, I would like to show you the actual periodical calculation, which you can test on demand as well. So in this example, you see that there are 5 components, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3 application components, and 2 data stores. And you can see that the number of components is automatically calculated here. So there are 5 components. There are already also 2 input and output flows, and 3 supported functional blocks. These are all read-only because they've been automatically calculated. And this one is the amount of documentation. This is calculated based on the other values. That is for architecture management as well. So let's add some let's first look at the same result in Prolaborate. You can see the same application which has a document amount of 33. So the amount of documentation for this application is 33 as calculated here, so it's correct. If I add some components, what will happen? Okay, let's see. If I recalculate now, specialize Labnaf, calculate values. So if I recalculate after having recalculated these values, you can see that number of components is now 10, which is correct. 5 there and 5 here, so they are all inside these application. And you can see also that the amount of documentation has been also recalculated. Now it is 48. So it was 33 before. Now it is 48. If we go back to Prolaborate, so it was 33. If I refresh, you can see that now it is 48. So this is correct. Okay, the next thing I would like to demonstrate the architecture management and validation. So this diagram is used for architecture management. It is used to assign, for instance, a functional domain to an architect, a package to another individual, and using that, the model validation engine will route the messages to the appropriate individuals. And it uses a combination of all these relationships that you can see there. And it's also based on the authors of the elements. So the routing engine use these rules based on the priorities that you have set. You can configure that different ways. And there is, of course, also a default recipient. So what else can I show? For instance, the dashboard. So for each stage, each step in the transformation process, there is a specific dashboard. These are dashboards for enterprise architecture. We saw some for the application portfolio management. And there is one, well, let's say, for instance, the project architecture. You can see that for each project, there is a little dashboard showing the number of viewpoints that are missing. That is for governance of project architecture, of solution architecture, to make sure that when people come to the architecture board, they provided the required amount of solution architecture documentation. So you can see, for instance, that this project there, ticket office sale, has 5 missing viewpoints. So these are all the mandatory viewpoints that are expected, and these are the ones that are missing. And if I go to these, to the other one there, this one is complete. You can see that it has all its viewpoints, mandatory viewpoints completed. Nothing is missing. Now, if you want to see how this is calculated, it's based on some configuration. So you have different scenarios. This is the IT solution architecture scenario. You have another one. Here, which is infrastructure solution architecture, which has less mandatory viewpoints. So to summarize, the fact is that you can assign projects to different scenarios, architecture solution scenarios, and each scenario has a list of mandatory viewpoints. And based on that, it provides you some dashboard of the status of this project in terms of documentation completeness. So that's all I wanted to demonstrate today. Thank you very much for your attention.
We cannot see you, but we thank you all for sharing your time with us this morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever your case may be. Feel free to contact us to learn more and schedule demos. So we will be available for you via MS Teams, of course, and we will be now trying to answer your questions. Thank you.